Consumer Council.
Just to move it on into everyday bread and butter issues, as households we're all feeling the great burden of government inflation, and whilst we all accept that we need to pay for public services if we want to have good services and infrastructure, what steps are you going to take to make sure that these payments are actually fair and affordable?
This is water charges you're thinking of?
Rates,
water charges.
Yes.
All right.
Based inflation.
Okay. Alan McFarland.
Well, I mean, we have a problem here. Basically, the government used the money that should have gone into our infrastructure over the last 30 years to pay for security. I was Deputy Chair of the Regional Development Committee in the First Assembly, and we went into this in enormous detail about the state of everything. And it's very appalling. It's going to cost billions to fix.
Could we just deal with water charges? Sorry to interrupt you. Could we? I don't want to get this go too loose. Could we deal with water charges? Because I think that's one that's being raised with politicians on the doorstep. So what about what's the Ulster Unionist position possibly going into an assembly and an executive on water charges?
Well, I mean, we think that the current proposals are absolute nonsense and should be stopped and reviewed here. Again, back in the first assembly, we were looking at the issue of water metering, because all the sort of polls and asking the public about what they want is they wanted to pay for what they use, which is what they do for electricity and everything else, and people understand how that works. The whole issue of the sort of conservation of water seems to have been ignored. There's an EU directive on the and if you have people simply paying for their water, they're not leaving their taps on all the time as a protest. I mean, this is barking stuff. It doesn't go anywhere near that. So the issue of you paying water charges on the value of your house is absolute. The whole issue of the rates and is nonsense.
So are you saying there should be metering?
Sorry? No, what I'm saying is that most people, when you ask them, would like to meter their water. They would like to pay for what they use. Now, clearly, there's some people you would have to have derogations for example, but we would support a sort of a non-means testing for pensioners, for example. And clearly, those who are on benefits, I mean, staff trying to get them to pay their own money for things that they don't have the money for.
Sorry, Alan, I just want to get this clear. Are you or are you not in favour of metering?
We are in favour of metering for those who wish to have it, but you need
voluntary water metering.
Yes, you need to have a system here that is fair and equitable and that people can see. So there's several things. We need to split the whole business of water away from the rates. People need to see what it is they're paying for. They need to understand why they've got to pay for it. Our view is that the government should do what they did in England and in Wales and Scotland before they privatised in that particular case. And that is, they brought the infrastructure up to its correct level, and then you start off from there. We worked out on the first assembly, we supported this GoCo business, but there was never a question of being privatised. And one of the difficulties we have at the moment, it is clear that the government intend to get this up and running and then privatise it. Non-starter, you cannot have water and those sort of facilities privatised.
Right, so you would have water charges, you recognise the need for them, but you think it's fairer if there's metering for people who want it. Is that a fair summary of your position?
Yeah, first of all, they exist at the moment. It's just that they're not clear where they are.
All right, okay.
We need the infrastructure sorted out. We then obviously have a much lower, because the charges involved here to do with replacing infrastructure, it's not just paying for water. People generally want to pay for what they use, and that's a clearly understandable system they use elsewhere.
All right.
And it certainly shouldn't be on this current proposal of the government, which is barking.
Alma Guinness, do you agree with metering?
Not in the present context,
right.
But perhaps in the future, if we are going to have a system of payment. We in the SDLP have opposed water charging. We will continue to oppose water charging. When we're in government, if there is a government, we will demand that the whole system be reviewed. The present system, the first year, will be implemented. It is unstoppable. But I do not believe that we should go beyond that first year. If we can get a scheme, an alternative scheme worked out, at this moment in time, people are paying for water, even though they're not paying water charges, and they're paying for water through their rates. That's the reality of the situation. So effectively what you've got is an additional payment for water, and in addition to that you're paying an additional tax on your property, because the water charge is related to the value of your house. Now, it's an absurd system.
You need 3 billion to set
No,
the
I
system
understand
right.
that.
Where do you get that from if you don't have water charges?
Seamus, that's an entirely different question.
What is the question, isn't it?
Well, no, it's not, because what the government very unfairly is saying is that you have to pay an additional amount of money to pay for the infrastructure and servicing water and sewage, and that is not correct. For example, in the past year, you had 400 million underspend in Northern Ireland. Now, there must be savings to be made within the administration, and there can be savings made within the administration. People out there are prepared to pay fair charges in the context of trying to complement what government is doing in relation to rebuilding infrastructure. But they're not prepared to pay excessive charges and unfair charges.
Christopher Stolford.
I think most of the points have been made. I think the key thing is that in relation to water charges and in relation to the general rates regime that they're talking about bringing in, the capital value of a person's home should not be the determining factor in deciding what they pay.
Your manifesto suggests you want water metering instead.
Yes, we are in favour of extending water metering on the basis that people should pay for what they use. They should not be charged for something that they're not using. And in terms of the area that I represent in the City Hall, in Stranmillis and Rosetta and places like that, what I have found is that asset-rich but cash-poor constituents are being taxed on an asset that the only way they're going to be able to realise the asset to pay their bills is to sell their home.
So you recognise the need for water charges, but you want metering.
Well, water charges are here.
Right.
Government
You
brought
accept
them
that?
in. No, I don't accept what they're bringing in, because I think they're
Yeah.
charging us twice for something that we're already paying for.
But you accept the need. We accept that we must pay for our water.
I think I accept that the water service needs significant levels of investment.
Right, and we must pay for our water.
If we're going to pay for it in a direct manner, rather than the indirect manner that we pay for it presently through our rates, it should be separate, and people should know exactly what they're paying for, and the system should be based on the amount of water that people are consuming.
Do you believe in me? Sorry, just finish.
Yeah, and I think that the key thing is that there are efficiencies that can be made in government to lessen the impact of the introduction of water charges. And at St Andrews, we secured the setting up of an efficiency review panel to find where these efficiencies in government can be made.
All right. Do you believe in water metering, John O'Dowd?
No, and I think the difficulty with the debate we're having at the minute is that we're sending a mixed message out, especially to the British government at this stage. I think politicians should be saying at this stage we're opposed to water charging as set out in the current legislation, that it isn't the way forward. And that see when we start breaking it down and that we're in favour of water metering and we're in favour of charging other ways and this, that and the other, it isn't a combined message, and I think the British government needs to be hearing one single message.
There isn't a single message.
Yes, but there needs to be a single message. That single message needs to be that they must ensure that there's proper investment in infrastructure and services in the north of Ireland.
So you believe the money should come from central funding?
Well, as has already been said, before the water services was privatised and handed over to private investors in England, the British government used taxpayers' money to bring the infrastructure up to standard. So I don't see any reason why the British government, who has a responsibility here, shouldn't bring the water structures up to standard here and then allow a local executive to move forward and maintain those services.
Well, there's no sign. I'll come back to you. There's no sign of them doing that. So where else? From where in the Northern Ireland Block grant do you suggest the $3 billion come
we
from?
we haven't quit negotiating with the British government in terms of peace with them, so those negotiations are still ongoing.
Is there any indication from them in those negotiations that
well,
you'll get this money?
Over the last 10 years, we have learned that negotiations go on to the very last moment.